Hey, Bridge Church, welcome to the Midweek podcast. This is Pastor Tyler Wolf, the pastor of our Oconomowoc campus here, and I'm so grateful for this way to be able to spend just a few moments with you via the podcast whenever it is that you're listening. If you're a part of Bridge Church, you know that we have a discipleship blueprint, if you will, called Pathway, and Pathway is made up of 7 different practices. Now, you may say, Pastor Tyler, I cannot add 7 new things into my life. And I always like to tell people that these 7 practices, the pathway, are not 7 new things to add, but they are 7 things to integrate to build the rest of your life around. A helpful way that I have been thinking about it lately is when you put together a puzzle, what is the first thing that you do? Well, you find all the pieces with the flat edge, which is the border, and you put those together first. That way, you can fill in the middle with a little bit of structure to work off of. And that's what Pathway is about. It's just kind of creating a border or a framework for your life with God as He graciously walks with you through good and through bad as you fill in the middle. All 7 of these practices are not new things. These are things that Jesus and or His disciples did as we observe their life in Scripture. You can find it all on bcpathway.life, which has recently been updated with brand new content for you to kind of mull over as individuals or in your bridge group. Now, like I said, the 7 practices of Pathway are that border of the puzzle as God graciously walks with you as you fill in the middle in your life with Him and your life in the world. And that filling in the middle portion has been something I've been thinking about in terms of Psalm chapter 78. And this is written by a guy named Asaph. And in verse 5 through 7, he says this, talking about God, he said, He established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which He commanded our fathers to teach to their children, that the next generation might know them, the children yet unborn, and arise and tell them to their children, so that they should set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep His commandments. Let's focus on the words here. He says that God established a testimony for the sake of telling the next generation, even the unborn, so that they may set their hope in God. The testimony was for telling, so that those who hear it would set their hope in God. I think about that testimony that God was writing in the lives of the Israelites, and that truthfully He's writing in our lives as a congregation. I think about it as like an inheritance that's being saved up. And so if a father works long hours to put away money so that one day he can pass something of value along to his children, well, what does that take? It takes struggle, it takes work, it takes friction, it takes saying yes to work and no to the kids at times. And of course, a child doesn't quite know what's going on with the value in that dad going off to work each and every day. They just know that they're not there at that moment. So they feel the struggle in that, but they don't know that something very valuable will be passed on to them. Here's what I mean by that. The Lord is establishing a testimony in you through whatever it is that you're facing or dreaming right now. And I believe that it's a testimony that will be passed down as a valuable inheritance to someone else. That there is a missional purpose as God compels you to the world around you to whatever it is that you're facing right now. Now, hear me. I'm not just saying that if you're going through a hard time, that God's going to use it. As true as that may be, this also applies to the good times. That God might be doing something positive or joyful in you, but it has the same end to that means, which is passing it on to someone else for the ultimate end of every means, that God would be worshipped, so that they may set their hope in God. Well, later on in this psalm in verse 16, it says, He made streams. He's reflecting now. God made streams come out of the rock, and He caused waters to flow down like rivers. And so he's reflecting on when God performed a miracle through Moses, and Moses struck a rock with his staff, and water flowed from this rock, and that was how the Israelites were able to have a refreshing and provisional drink of cool water. So in the Old Testament, God provided for his people by striking the rock and drawing the water out. But in the New Testament, Jesus looked at Peter and he said, "Hey, Peter, you are the rock. One day you will be struck and living water will flow from you." And I had a professor in college named Dr. Rick Painter who would preach this message once a year to us as future ministers. And I just want to share that with you, that, man, you are the rock. In the Old Testament, the rock was the rock, but it was all pointing to the one day that Jesus would commission us, and he would say, "You are the rock." And whatever being struck looks like for you results in living water flowing out from us as we love the people God has put in our lives. And so, as a church, I want us to embrace the striking and let the living water flow through you to others. And so, in the words of my great professor in college, Bridge Church, you are the rock. One day God will strike you, and rivers of living water will flow out of you to the world around us. And so Psalm 78 is a psalm of reflecting all that God had done for the Israelites, and also reflecting what he did for them while they were in the desert. And so I think that following Jesus just gives us a different perspective on whatever the desert might be for us. And there's a man named Richard Alpert that once said, he had a stroke, and he said, "I don't wish a stroke on anyone, but I wish the grace of the stroke on everyone." And I just want to challenge us to see, what is God's grace actively doing in me? Man, it's in those times that the bad times quit seeming so bad. They can quit being referred to as bad times. They can be referred to as grace times, because God is always, always working, developing a testimony for us to pass on to someone else so that they may put their hope in God. Worship is the end of every means.